Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm MJ. I am a non-binary and autistic science fiction and fantasy author. This channel is all about the craft of writing with a neurodivergent and queer focus. This video is part of a how to self-publish series, and let's work on getting your book published in 2026. Editors. It's just one word, but it invokes so many questions and emotions. Don't worry, today we are going to talk about if you need an editor, what type of editor you need, and how to find an editor. Let's dive in. Do you need an editor? The short answer is yes, you do. Alpha and beta readers are helpful, but they are not trained editors. They can provide you with high-level feedback, but not basic details that will make your book ready to be published. If you want more details on alpha and beta readers, you can check out last week's video in the series. Look, I know this may not be the answer that you want to hear. Editors cost money, and when you are self-publishing, that money often comes from you or through fundraising efforts such as Kickstarter. It is a lot of work, but to have your book ready to be published, it needs to go through an editor. What if you don't? If an editor isn't an option, you can proceed with publishing your book, but there can be consequences. Readers only have a select amount of money, and if they spend theirs on a book that contains a lot of grammar errors, doesn't flow well, or has writing that could use a lot of sprucing up, they will let you know in the reviews. Even if you then take that book down and get it edited, you will be stuck with the bad reviews. Well, for the most part, but we'll talk about that all in a future video. Here's the honest truth. Even with an editor, your book will not be error-free. No book is, even traditionally published ones. However, an editor will help your book to be the best version it can be. So what type of editor do you need? There are different types of editors that are used in different times in the writing cycle, and let's break them down. First, let's talk about developmental editors. A developmental editor is typically hired after beta readers. You have feedback on your story, you have probably rewritten it based upon that feedback, and it is hopefully in great shape, but you could still use the help of a developmental editor. What they will do is take a look at the overall structure of your novel. Does it flow? Are there plot holes? Do your characters come across on the page? These are higher level edits that can have you potentially doing major rewrites of your story. If you are a newer author, I highly recommend hiring a developmental editor, specifically one with good experience. I used a developmental editor for my first 3 books. I don't now because this is a personal strength, and I know that this is an area where I can cut back on finances, but a developmental editor was invaluable when I was first starting. I learned a lot from doing the edits. I also see a lot of authors with really fantastic ideas, and they may have great grammar, but they're lacking in world building and structure. A developmental editor will really help with that. If you do make substantial edits, you may want to have a second round of beta reading to review all the changes that were made. However, this is entirely up to you. So once the shape of your story is in a good place, it's time to focus more on your language. And this is where line editors will come in, and they will give you edits on the overall structure of how you write. They'll point out fragmented sentences, changes in POV, overuse of language, and filler words, to name a few examples. Where a developmental edit looks at the overall story, a line edit is more granular analysis of the language being used. A good line editor will help improve your writing without changing your voice. If an editor tries to rewrite your story, then they are not an editor. Often, line edits can be combined with copy edits, which we'll talk more about next. If you are a newer author, you may not want to combine edits because you may be making significant changes in sentences, and the copy editing suggestions may no longer be helpful. So what are copy edits? A copy edit is looking at the grammar and technical aspects of your writing. This is more than proofreading, which we'll talk about next. This is a deep dive analysis to make sure that your punctuation is correct, sentences flow, and are clear. This is the last deep dive into editing, and in my opinion, one of the most important. So what about proofreading? Proofreading is really the last check before a book goes out. It is a quicker edit where your proofreader checks for typos, consistency, and grammar. This is the last round of edits before your book is ready to release. Should you use the same editor for each round? Honestly, probably not. While a lot of editors are trained in all aspects of editing, you may find editors who specialize in one aspect over others. That isn't to say that you need different editors for each stage, but you could have an editor do developmental edits and then send it back to the same editor for line edits. And as I mentioned earlier, you can get copy edits and line edits done at the same time by the same editor. There are benefits to having different editors for at least some aspects of editing. For one, you are not locking in on someone else's voice. And this is especially important if you are a newer author. Also, editors will have different perspectives. The first developmental editor I worked with was very good at what she did, but insisted that my 30-year-old autistic single mother should act like her 10-year-old autistic nephew. If I used her for line edits, in addition to developmental edits, that same bias would have been transferred onto the page. However, the biggest reason to use different editors is just so that you can get multiple sets of eyes on your book. A fresh perspective can help catch things that have been missed. So if nothing else, I do suggest a different proofreader than your other editors. So how do you find an editor? If you are self-publishing, know that there are a lot of unqualified people offering editing services. The number of people who have reached out to me to offer to edit my books is more than the number of people offering to charge me for reviews. So, a lot. So how can you find a good editor? Well, I found my first editor through Reedsy. Be warned that Reedsy has a very limited window to file a dispute, so don't let an editor go past the return window because then you will be out of luck if things go bad. I found this out when working with a proofreader. The proofreader kept asking for more time to return edits, and I was happy to work with them. When I finally received the edits back, they were not good. I was outside the 7-day window for Reedsy, so I couldn't get my money back, and I had to pay for a second editor. I've since stopped using Reedsy services. Fiverr is another option. However, Fiverr doesn't do any sort of verification or vetting. There are reviews though, so you can use those to help determine if you will work well with an editor. Referrals from another author are another good way of finding editors. And no matter which route you choose, make sure that the editor will give you a sample edit. This is usually where they edit the first 2 to 5 pages of your novel. Pay close attention to how they edit and if that will work with your vision. Also, I will add that with the rise of AI, you will want to make sure that your editor is not using AI to edit your novel. How will you know? Well, first make sure that this is a clear intent and agreed on by both parties. As for the other, from what little research I have done, AI seems to return very formalistic edits. If you do use an editor outside of a platform such as Reedsy, make sure that you have a contract. Agree to the terms of when payment will happen. It is understandable that they will want payment before returning the document to you, but you want to make sure that you are protected and have a document returned to you as well with services rendered. Also, to be clear, I am not a legal expert and none of this is legal advice, but you may want to pay with a credit card or PayPal so that you have means of disputing if edits are not what was agreed upon. We have covered a lot, but hopefully this is a helpful guide to get you started on finding an editor. If you have any specific questions or want to share your experience, let me know in the comments. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more WriterTube content every Tuesday. I host live writing sprints on Fridays from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. Mountain Time. Come write with me. If you want to support the channel, you can buy me a coffee. The link is below. Happy writing, and remember, you're learning, you're growing, and that's what matters. And as always, keep reading, keep writing, and keep dreaming.